question first.
Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum. I'm very happy to hear today for the first time Professor Noraini. I congratulate you. I have not gone through the trials and tribulations of what you have gone through. Hopefully not, but I do believe that academia is actually dead in public universities or in private university. But that is not an excuse. My philosophy has always been not to be fighting with someone, but to look at other avenues for us to expand. So I don't really have a question, but just a message, short message to the young people over here. Speaking as an academic of 30 years experience, an academic what I consider, Noraini and I, traditional academic. Modern academics are those who chase grants and things they are successful by writing journals and things like that. We chase books and seminars and try to change things in society. I don't know whether that's the right term of a definition of academia. So my message to the young people here, the true learning is not at the university. The true learning is only in such forums as this. So you have to look towards learning, real learning. You know, learning to be an architect, I teach architects, or engineer, something to, it's just a profession for you to do something so that you can have a house or something like that. But the point here is that true learning is awakening. It's conscious awakening. Now, I would like to just end by saying about what I learned from Abul A'la Maududi when in his book Towards Understanding Islam, where he said that you are not a Muslim until you understand what being Muslim is all about. And so I always say to some people in speeches, I said, I became a Muslim at my 3rd year at university in the US, because before that I was a term it as cultural Muslim. Okay, so there was a simple question that I was telling my wife, this issue about going out of Islam, you know, that is going out of Islam and going into another person's religion, keluar dari Islam. So I said, my wife, bila masa yang kita Islam, you know, you are born into a Muslim cultural family. Where was it somewhere that you signed somewhere that you are Muslim? Okay, so this is one of the aspects of university education that does not exist, to be able to question authorities, to question whatever cultural heritage that we have. Questioning does not mean that we reject. Questioning may mean a stronger affirmation of things. And this is the thing that does not happen. And as what you have explained. So I thought that was a message. And my concern for the new politician was that how do we overcome education when we know that the so-called universities are no longer useful in this awakening. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum. I would like to address question to, I guess you know who, Dr. Zulkifli Ahmad, and also to another politician, Chin Tong, as well. You see, it's good to know that we have graduated to become a Muslim Democrat, a second generation political Islam. But and it's good to know that you have embraced a new kind of politics. But I guess that the real challenge that we are facing now, as you had alluded clearly in the first part of the speech, that we're having economic problems. That's the most pressing problem that we're facing nowadays in this country. What I see is that even though this, you might have graduated to become more embracing towards pluralism and towards differing views and the minority rights and so on and so forth, what would be your economic agenda for if you manage to hold a government or to form a government? Because you see that what happened in the Middle East, I'd written 3 articles basically previously. One assessing the fall of Ennahda in Tunisia. Second was on the fall of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. And third was of this fiasco in Turkey, right? With the Gezi Park and, all kinds of fiasco over there. And if you look at all these three nations, especially to the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt and Ennahda in Turkey, even though they were very progressive, but I guess that according to my analysis and in my articles that, it was published by the Malaysian Insider before, and one by New Mandala of the Australian National University, there was one common factor. That was both regimes, or not regimes, but both new government, Islamic government, of the Muslim Brotherhood and of Ennahda, they embraced one entity of economy which is known as neoliberalism. And I understand, Chintong, that you profess that, you're a social democrat. And the thing is that we want to know, like the people would like to know, what would be your economic agenda? I mean, what is the basis of your economic agenda? And is there a common platform with regard to Amanah, BAP, and Bersatu, and, if you can come up with a common platform that can show that your economic agenda is more viable than the current economic agenda of the ruling coalition. The problem now is that I think that the people, they will not have trust that the Harapan will be able, Pakatan Harapan will be able to govern the government, to govern a country without a clear economic agenda. You can talk about politics, you can talk about, having a plural society, you can talk about being, how do I say, more liberal to certain views, but people, the bread and butter is the most important thing, is that what is the economic agenda? And I hope that both of you could address this issue. Thank you very much.
Very simple question. We have two politicians here. So my question is, do we need religion for a political economy? Thank you.
Simple. Never give up. Never give up. Just persist. Persist for the pursuit of what? Truth, of opening up the debate, of encouraging our students to speak up, to read, to question. You yourself made that point very well about what is wrong with questioning certain assumption, questioning common beliefs.
Respond by Prof. Noraini in some ways looks like even the academics need some strategy on politics too. So I'm going to give Dr. Zul first to respond on mainly the economic agenda and also can touch on the political economy relates to religion.
Okay, let me just go straight into the coming from Amanah per se, and of course with Pakatan, those policies that we have, proposed, almost like every year, we came up with an alternative budget to contest the federal government budget of BN. I hope most, if not all of you, have seen and read it and perused it, much as you may disagree, but that is an effort that we do almost religiously every year without fail. Yeah? And that was, from our Barisan Alternative days, from 1999. Of course, the understands that, but I think in this particular question, I think he wants me to allude to a very clear-cut principles of what I would, as Amanah, how would Amanah address this? Now let us get back to this issue of economic problem of man and its solution. If I may just summarize it all, perhaps it is best summarized by the latest writing of Thomas Piketty, Capital in the 21st Century. And that is, in fact, a writing that illustrates the failure of capitalism, if I may say. And all along, economic theories and contestation has always been about distribution. right? Labor theory of value, finally, is premised on what belongs to capital and what belongs to labor. What belongs of profit, the fractional income distribution, what goes back to capital, the capital or capitalist or owner of capital, and what would appropriately be rendered back and given back to labor in terms of wages. Now let me tell you that Islamic solution doesn't come with a complete model of an economic solution, you know. You should know that very well. And but what is in the Quran, what is in the Sunnah, and what is more importantly elaborated now in Maqasid, and you have writings of Professor Omar Chapra and the like of these Islamist Muslim scholars, contemporary, you find in them an illustration of how principles of Islam. You go back to Maqasid on the 5 imperatives. Yeah, you may proselytize or preach to you a bit on this. 5 imperative of, you know, Hifzul Mal, Hifzul Aqal, Hifzul Deen, Hifzul Nasab, and then Hifzul, what else? You know, we begin with usually preservation of religion, preservation of Aqal, of minds, and then life, and then progeny, and finally of property. So premise in the imperative of Maqasid is preservation of mal. And preservation of mal is not now like, you know, like those that has been, you know, the writing of Shatibi, Shatibi in his seminal writing of hypoglycemia this morning. Really, it was why I was trying to apologize earlier. It took 600 years, almost, yeah, 600 years before Shatibi, revisited by the, you know, the scholar that died in 1973, Ibn Ashur. Oh my God, my memory is going away. It's no longer about preservation but enrichment, al-ithra. So the Maqasid al-Sharia no longer simply talks about preservation now. We have come to a stage where managing public policies, managing government, nation states and whatnot. So if I may just quickly, you know, summarize it all. The essence of Hifzul Mal is just not about wealth creation, but more importantly, wealth redistribution. And the essence of Islamic economy is, beside creating wealth through enjoining enterprises, market, that market is value loaded, but, you know, free enterprise, I may say, if I may say, you know, but because the Prophet immediately on arriving in Medina established mosques and immediately a souk, the market, and making sure that, you know, the mu'amalats, the dealings, the economic dealings and transactions and whatnot is, you know, from day one would be compliant, not just compliant, driven by the Islamic, but driven by the Sharia purpose of essentially dealings in, you know, in ways that bring about justice. So the essence, if I may summarize, the essence of Islamic economy rests in that verse in Surah Al-Hashr, where Allah says, if I may just quote that particular fraction of the verse, كَيْ لَا يَكُولَ دُولَةً بَيْنَ الْأَغْنِيَاءِ مِنْكُمْ. That perchance, or, you know, for wealth not to be revolving, not to be concentrated among the minkum, the rich and the super rich of you. So the essence of Islamic economy is actually distribution. And when you come to address this, then we come to the real perennial problem of the economic problem of man, which is disparity. And the essence of disparity rests on the issue of wages, and particularly in the context of Malaysia, suppression of wages. Hence, Pakatan's policy, and particularly Amanah, we look into, beside, of course, the cost of living. The cost of living is essentially the introduction of GST, the withdrawal of subsidy, are all about, finally, leadership. And the toxic leadership that has concentrated too much wealth and power, and finally, having policy that actually victimize the rakyat. So, without, in many words, I would dare premise the Islamic or the Amanah's response to this, to the economic problem of Malaysia and the problem of man, is essentially to address wages. And wages would finally addresses the issue of disparity, both income and wealth. And of course, I would dare say that somehow the social market economy of the Scandinavian countries and Germany as well, somehow to me is closer to how wages could be ascertained, that fairness finally rendered back to labor, and the whole issue of distribution is addressed. So, with that quick response, perhaps. And of course, having said that, I wouldn't want to forget saying that I'm also a great believer in the new institutional economics of Douglas North, and which is not a classical Islamic, not economic thought or school of thought, but the role of institution, strengthening the role of institution, particularly the one that manages market and enterprises. When they are able to exude and exhibit and practice ombudsman, Hizbah, those are critical institutions that must be strengthened, particularly, as I said, in regard to managing the market, as not to cause distortion and what have you, crony capitalism, embezzlement, and all these good governance issue. And that's something else, perhaps. But these are critical policies enjoined by Islam. So in a way, somewhere between social market economies and new institutional economics and few models of economy, I dare say that the Islamic economy, based on this maqasid, based on, because I see the challenge is not about rhetoricizing. It's not about rhetoric anymore. The challenge is to be able to address, policies, pertinent policies in regard to ascertaining wages. And how do we allow for competition? How do we allow for free and fair and opportunities to be given? And as you know very well, that Malaysia, because power is concentrated in the executive branch of the government, you get to see the finance minister, you get to see the PM, who is also the finance minister, almost like concentrating. Corporate Malaysia here in Malaysia belongs to PM. It's not the private sector. The work of Terence Gomez would have alluded to you, very abundantly on this issue. So, Dr. Faruq, this is my immediate response on this, and hopefully, we can discuss further on this. But more importantly, as you correctly say, the challenge on us to provide, clear-cut policies. And of course, we address the issue of GST, the issue of cost of living, unemployment, housing, because we believe that cost of living are all related to providing, reasonable providing or addressing the issue of transportation costs, housing, health, education, and whatnot. I thank you.
You want to respond on the question? Do we need religion?
Of course. I think it's not for me. It's the discourse of whether we need religion or not. I think is an overworked cliche. I mean, it's gone past. I think Professor Chandra must have alluded to all of you, and his writing and I think exploring religion in our time, clearly and categorically, unequivocally, to me, is solid on the fact that for as long as dishonesty, for as long as greed are the disease of man that has exploited not just economic domain, but as well, political concentration of power for the power that be, religion, particularly the maqasid of religion, just not religion per se, but what religion provides to this perennial problem of humanity is the sure role of religion. But of course, not religion in that bigoted sense, and you know what I've got to say on this. But religion, the maqasid of the higher intents of religion. And for as long as the religion provides principles and values that are universal, cutting across, I've tried to alluded earlier, the role of religion to be that liberating force, binding force, unifying force, as opposed to just be doing the antithesis of all this. Religion is here to stay, and for as long as the adherents and the political players of religious political party, be whatever they are, Christian, Hindus, and Muslim, you get to see religion as the truly liberating force in society. I thank you.
Before I go into replying, I want to say that I'm very touched by Dr. Noraini's speech. I think what she has gone through basically is an experience that none of us want to go through, and we should try to ensure that the next generations of scholars and also Malaysians don't have to go through. I share Faruq's view very much. I met the former secgen of Ikhwan Muslimin, Mahmud Hussein. Mahmud Izzat. No, we met with Saksman in Turkey. We met him, he's in exile. He was former section in one faction, belongs to one faction, I think. Over the 1.5 hour discussions, you're trying to ask him about economic questions, and he couldn't answer. And I thought, it was an experience for me because that was in 2015. It was already 2 years after Moshi was brought down. And I thought, for a movement that big, there must be some ideas about economy and among the leaders, but there wasn't. Not in him. And I think it's important. I share your view that on the questions of not having a clear idea about the economy, and the moment you take power, you embrace neoliberal ideas. I think these are two major problems that we have to avoid. These are two major problems that we have to avoid. That is not having an basic economic framework and embracing neoliberal ideas straight away. And I am worried. In our public discourse, because our public discourse is dominated by race, religion, royalty, it's very difficult to bring out a proper economic debate. And once you bring out a debate, very often people look for shortcut. Look for simple ideas because we assume that everyone is not interested in economy. So that is what I'm worried. I'm worried that our debates on the economy is not in depth. It doesn't actually solve the issues, and perhaps we should. For whoever that can, we should try to expand the debate on our economic structure, our economy as a whole. in order to bring forth a new discourse and also to move forward. I think broadly, our problem is we are still stuck in 1997. The Malaysian economy, the last time that the Malaysian economy was doing very well, or at least very hopeful to ordinary people. Ordinary people think that the economy was hopeful, was progressing well, was probably in 1997. And we are still stuck in many ways over the past 20 years. And they say 20 years is a generation. We probably have a wasted generation as far as the economy is concerned. Well, stuck because we are still in export-led economy. We're still thinking of export-led economy, but today we have nowhere to export to, or not. We are not exporting as much to US and Europe because they had a major economic crisis 10 years ago or 9 years ago, and they're still stuck to a large extent. So export-led economy, the East Asian model, to a large extent is stuck. But how do we create value? How do we actually ensure that we have fair distribution within our society? These are really difficult questions. So you're stuck in the East Asian model. We are stuck because of our domestic inability of the current government to move away from dependence on unskilled foreign labor. And therefore, we are also stuck because there's no productivity gain. And when you have no productivity gain, and also you have a huge number of unskilled foreign labor in the country, you have the race to the bottom. The result is that the best export that we have is actually to export our people to Singapore. I mean, over the last decade or so, so many Malaysians are working in Singapore and elsewhere and beyond. And we are now increasingly in that dynamic of we are at a higher level of Philippine, in the sense that the Philippine export maid, we export nurses. But this is not the way to go. So globally, the global economy is not in good shape, and we are not addressing the fundamental issues, wages, economic structure. And Dr. Zul pointed out, the Malaysian economy is very much controlled by GLCs. The GLCs are owned by government, but actually acting like a private sector in speculative sectors. For instance, the GLC are private developers. If you look at the top 10 developers in the country, at least 5 or 6 of them are owned by the government. SP Setia, IJM, Gamuda. They are the big, what they call, Eco is private. They are also what they call a few others. So the public sector also act as a private developer. The public sector is the largest owner of palm oil estate. And palm oil may not necessarily be the best crop when you want to think about agriculture, when you want to think about developing diversity and also in agriculture, and also conservation of water, conservation of land. The public sector, the government sector or GLC sector also own almost all private hospital. Okay? Almost all private hospital, beside a few like Asunta, which are entirely privately owned. Most of the private hospital in this country, this is the ironic part of it, most of the private hospital in this country are owned by the government. And we have a two-tier system where the government hospital is not paying doctor well, and therefore also compromising its services or its quality of services. And the private sector are squeezing middle class for their hospital fees. And so, and as a whole, the nation doesn't benefit. And of course, over the last 30 years, the government is also a car dealer. And therefore not putting enough money into public transport. I think those are the areas where we have to address. I don't know, I mean, we need help. Pakatan Harapan needs help because Pakatan Harapan can do as much to push this forward. to push the economic debate to the front, but I think we need more people like Dr. Faruq to push the idea that we must have proper and in-depth economic debate, and we must not, whoever takes power or whoever continues to rule in the years to come must not fall into straight away a straitjacket neoliberal idea. Thank you. Oh, sorry, on the questions of whether we need religion in political economy, I think it depends on how you define religion, and for me, we need, political economy needs value to guide. If religion for you means a value system, then I say yes. We need, the economy cannot just for economic sake. Economy at the end must be guided in order to achieve certain values for human advancement. So to that extent, I think we need to have a religious debate or of religion in economy in order to achieve human advancements.
I think the role of values, and even to the point of, going back to Adam Smith, you have his writing a theory of a moral sentiment before even writing on Wealth of Nation. So, all those goes to allude on the role of values, religious or otherwise, that is actually ingrained within an economic system. Until and unless you have that, greed and dishonesty, which is the basis of this kleptocratic government, and embezzlement and whatnot, will never be addressed. Thank you.
My name is Adriana. I'm a corporate lawyer by training. So I've been working since the Asian financial crisis, when the ringgit was just down in the dumps. After almost 20 years, the ringgit has gone back to where I started when I first started my career in the late 1990s. I've been a voting citizen for the past 3 times as well. And I've been in the government service for about a decade, basically. And I've also worked in GOCs, government-owned companies. Basically, what I see is all these institutions that have been set up, it's for the good, basically. The government systems, the processes, the procedures, even in the government-owned companies, government-linked investment companies, government-linked companies. For me personally, there is no, there shouldn't be any impediment for it being owned or run by the government. The issue is when the political entities come and interfere, right? Just now Dr. Noraini was also saying that to ensure freedom of thought, freedom of expression, we must make sure that the playing field, and there's no harassment from religious authorities or even NGOs flying the flag of Islam, for example. But how I see it, 40 over years living in this country, the political regime, political parties basically, it's very difficult for them to balance between what is good, what is right for the masses, for the majority, and with their need or their greed to remain in power, to garner political votes. The question, very sorry YB, but it's basically for you to respond. One day, Pakatan Harapan, GAP, PKR, whatever it is, Amanah, Rafizi Ramli, whatever, they will be in power. But how do you ensure that you don't fall into the same trap, the same honey trap? Because there is a lot of money. Basically, Malaysia can actually run itself by the collection of income tax, both from individual taxpayers and corporate taxpayers. It's a lot of money there. So how do you ensure that you don't fall into the trap of, now you can say a lot of things, you can fight for a lot of human rights issues, you don't have the power yet. But when you are there in power, and the money is there for you to utilize fully, how do you ensure that you don't revert back? Are you agreeable for the Prime Minister's post to be, instead of in perpetuity 20 years and then inherited by their son or the daughter, are you agreeable for it to be reduced, for example, to 4-year term, only 2 terms? And the renewal is open to another election rather than an automatic renewal of the post. Thank you.
My name is Abdul Majid. I have an issue with regards to the labels that are being used nowadays. Number one is from the Islamic political parties. When you name yourself and label yourself as an Islamic, you automatically create this division between us and the others. And I ask the Islamic political leaders, would you join a political party labeled as Christian or Jewish? If yes, then that's good. But if not, then maybe you want to rethink the labels that you are using right nowadays under the name of Islam. Second, with regards to the Muslim feminist and liberalist people who call themselves with those terms, I have no issue with regards to the feminism and liberalism because I believe their principles are part of Islamic principles. But then, if you look in the general overview of the Muslim world, these terms have, at least feminism and liberalism, they have a very negative meaning in the Muslim world. So, if you are firmly believing the principles of feminism and liberalism, why don't you advocate for those principles without using these terms? That's for Dr. Noraini. For Dr. Zul, with regards to the Muslim politicians, if, as you mentioned, Islam is a universal religion with inclusive values, why don't you keep aside the term Islamic without compromising the principles and still advocate for what you're trying to advocate and show us what Islam or Muslim political parties can achieve when it comes to economics and social justice. Thank you.
Okay, hello. So I have a comment on I think Dr. Zul has said something about failing capitalism. So I don't think that capitalism is failing. I think that Western capitalism is failing, but China is doing better as a communist country, in a capitalist economy. It's just a matter of negotiating, false negotiating powers, political landscape in Europe, so on and so forth. But my question is more on brain drain that's happening in Malaysia. So I want every panelist to address my question because we can see a massive percentage of brain drain in Malaysia among the young people. Maybe my question is that on which one is the deal breaker here, whether it's on the economic issue or whether it's on freedom itself. Thank you.
If you refer to the last 15 years or even up to 20 years, 2 decades, particularly looking at the role and development of Muslim women's NGO, who may not label themselves as feminists, but most of them label themselves as feminists in their project, in their work to reclaim women's rights or to reclaim gender equality, at least particularly in the context of Islamic family law. Now, there's been a lot of literature on feminism and Islamic feminism, but in terms of the NGO activism, I think Sisters in Islam have played a role by using a new term, musawah, to mean gender equality. So the Musawah movement has been set up by linking various women's groups in Southeast Asia, Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, Thailand, with those in the Muslim or Middle Eastern countries, and now in the last few years, as well as Muslim women activists in Western countries, such as United States of America, in UK, and in Germany. Liberalism has always been a very difficult term. It has been misappropriated. It has been used to undermine people, activism working on the area of human rights. And if I remember correctly, in the 1980s, 1990s, under the umbrella of working for more gender equality and women's rights within the context of CEDAW, we've always been labeled to be liberal because the United Nations CEDAW was being looked at as a Western product. Yeah, but it's a convention to eliminate all forms of discrimination against women. That was the outcome of debate within the United Nations. I think one of the things that came out in the early literature of Islamic feminism was the Muslim feminist activists making the claim that the Prophet Muhammad was actually one of the earliest feminists. In the 6th century AD, he actually made changes that give Muslim women's the right to divorce, the right to keep their property upon marriage, that the husband have no automatic right to reclaim her property, as you find in Western context, in UK as until the 20th century even. Yeah, so there is that avenue and there is that space to make an argument and to promote the debate that feminism is not necessarily a dirty word, a Western-oriented import from the Western culture. So I think there is still a lot of room. We have not developed that kind of discourse and debate. If I may touch on the brain drain, whether it's an economic issue and academic freedom, I think it's both. From my conversation with younger scholars, academics that have moved to America, to Singapore, to Hong Kong, you cannot thrive in an environment that is mediocre, and that mediocrity has developed in the past 3 decades, partly by all the various various government policies. Some of them I've highlighted in terms of the role of religious authorities harassing and interfering, with academic freedom and academic activities. So it's academic because you cannot thrive when there is no academic freedom, and you don't feel any satisfaction if you work within the context where mediocrity has been promoted, and if you're not rocking the boat in terms of your research or your publication to do with various sensitive issues within the country.
Yeah, okay. I'll begin with Adriana's question. Yeah. I must agree with you. I must concur with you on the fact that, although GLCs and GICs, government investment companies, in fact, as I've said earlier, corporate Malaysia essentially is not a private sector. It is driven by the government, by the executive branch, and essentially it is now the Prime Minister. And if you may I just remind you that if you can read the recent writing of Professor Terence Gomez, I think that will summarize it very well. Now, however, I must say this: what we require, Adriana, is actually it must hinge on strengthening democratic institutions and practices, and then that's the key. There's, to me, the key measure, the key way, the key approach to address this. And for as long as, because right now you see, as I said earlier, the whole government is dysfunctional, but there's no check and balance. And check and balance is so cardinal, especially in Islamic, if I may use the word, good governance. The essence of good governance in Islam is actually a sunnah to tadafa. Because Allah says in the Quran, وَلَوْلَا دَفُ اللَّهِ النَّاسِ بَعْضُهُمْ بِبَعْضٍ لَفَسَدَتِ الْأَرْضُ. Had Allah not check and balance the excesses, whatever, of one group by another, the entire world will be destroyed. So this is what is missing, and this is what is, needed for us to move forward. So yeah, I would just make a note of that. And Brother Majid, I'm again also, you know why we have not called our party Islamic Party. We call ourselves Parti Amanah Negara, bukan Parti Amanah Rakyat. Ihsan, Parti Amanah Negara. Some would like to call it PAN or whatever. I'm not pedantic on that. You call us whatever that we are, but we are Amanah. Yeah. So the reason essentially is because of that. We want to move away from a formative approach to a substantive approach. And approach of Marcosit is essentially a substantive approach. It's about doing, it's about embodying, it's about getting things done, getting things done, and through actual implementation, actualization, be whatever, yeah, race relation, economics, governance, institution, yeah, transport, employment, wages, GST, nilai ringgit, that has susu, that has dwindled, 42% ever since Prime Minister Najib took over from 2009, 2011 particularly. So we want to believe that we want to share our conviction of Islam, the principles of Islam, because we want to be a critical political actor or player in nation rebuilding. So that has always been our approach. And we wouldn't want to isolate and, call ourselves Islamists, and making others feel like they are un-Islamist or they are un-Islamic. We understand where we come from. We truly believe in what you say that, but of course, we have no qualm to say that we advocate Islamic principles. And it's our right to, much as others would have their right to advocate their principle and conviction, ideological conviction, we, Amanah, no qualms to admit that we are enjoining and advocating Islamic principles, worldview, programs, and values. And in this contestation is what I said earlier in the verse, fastabiqul khairat, bersainglah, by one another, attain, what is for the betterment of society. Okay, that is second on Majid's. Aizat, well, we can discuss and debate this issue about whether capitalism is, failing and whatnot. But I've alluded to you on the book of, Piketty, Thomas Piketty, Capital in 21st Century, which essentially is about the failure of capitalism. Yeah, which of course, resulted in this huge, yawning divide, both income and wealth. So no comment about that. You got to admit the fact. Why so? Essentially, it's another debate. Because he alluded to crony capitalism. He alluded to all the distortion of market. The market is not perfect. Whatever. So. In a way, calling for intervention, in a way, it's so difficult to even define what is capitalism right now, whose version, yeah, whether it's Keynesians or classical. So, all this, I mean, I have my right to say that, to concur with many others that I've come to read their writings. But I don't think that is the main debate. They can enjoy and advocate their ideological belief, whether they are social democrats, social market economy. We from Amanah's perspective, we would like to contribute in this solving economic problem of man's and its solutions. So okay, I think that would be sufficient. On brain drain, yeah, I have a chance to also look into this, and I don't think it's job per se. It is, in order to get brain gain as opposed to brain drain, it's more than just wages. Although I've alluded to about wages earlier, but for those that we want to entice them back, those that have been trained whether in Europe or US or in Australia and others, is more on perhaps the index of happiness actually. Is upon professional satisfaction. Is about whether they think that they will be back here and be accorded the kind of or will enjoy that satisfaction that they achieve while working elsewhere, in the West or wherever. So I think that is a test, that is a challenge on leadership. It's no longer about trying to entice people, give them all the perks, give them all the privileges. But at the end of the day, they don't feel, because we are less of a Malaysian if we are not, subscribing to the political, ideology of the power that be. So, that, and then of course, academics, how they are given the freedom to express both, to publish and to communicate their ideas. That's why, Prof. Tajuddin earlier told me that, Prof. Nurani, sociology in academia is almost dead because they are stifled. They have been, suppressed. There's so much of denying. There's so much of denying of creativity and freedom. So hence you have that. So we are very keen to reverse all this, And of course, Adriana mentioned about a very pertinent point that I've forgotten. What makes you believe that once you get into Putrajaya, you will not do the same? Wow, that's a difficult question. Right. I thought exactly. That's why I said the way to, but I did not address it, the way that you put it. The way to address this is, to me, is about strengthening of institution, and the check and balances, and as well internally. We have now what is known as, in political science, perhaps, what is known as a term called toxic leadership. You have heard it, of course you know that. So toxic leadership is about a tripartite, three component that will be a sure formula for failure, a sure formula for producing toxic leadership. That is, charismatic leaders that right now you see, for good or bad, Trump, we have got a few here, I don't want to mention any names in Malaysia, you know that very well. And then blind following of die-hard followers. And finally, a system that allows for that. So with these three, a perfect chemistry, a perfect storm for a toxic leadership, and we have it here right now. And I have my fear that it's going to be more toxic. And as a toxicologist, I feel that social detoxification is a lot more than, clinical detoxification. Celah tak apa. Yeah, please. Yeah. Can you get to the mic?
Yes, something which all of you are not at fault, because you have been raised in an education that totally ignores the concept of democracy. In a democracy, it works two ways.
Yeah.
You put these people there, you are the one responsible to make sure that they don't do that. Thomas Jefferson said the same thing. You can have the most beautiful system, okay?
Yeah.
But he said that I don't know of any system, even if you make it nice, that it will not be corrupted.
Right.
And the only single thing that will ensure that it does not happen is education to the citizenry. So that means you must produce a new, responsible, and also critical-minded citizenry.
Right.
That is the key thing.
Very good, thanks. And as well, they must be informed. The basis of making electoral decision is actually an informed citizenry, informed voters. And that, of course, the ability to get access to information and be critical. Although I must, if the flip side of this, Arena, if I may, sorry, moderator, what I fear is that you all are the same lah. So whether we vote or not, well, sama aja 2 kali 5. And that's what I fear, because that is exactly what BN wants to do this election. Don't come up to vote. You're not going to change it much anyway. So I respond to this by a small anecdote. When someone who has got a bad tooth, come to a dentist. When he was requesting the dentist to pull out his tooth, the dentist look at him, do the immediate check, and then told him that I'm going to pull that tooth, which is a bad tooth, and the one beside. He said, no, just the bad tooth. Because this one is the one in front or at the back. It's okay. Only the molar. No, I'm just going to pull all the tooth because they're going to be bad anyway. I think that is the perverted logic that BN is trying to say that pakatan pun sama juga. They will be corrupt. So don't vote them, or at best don't come out to vote. That will be a sure disaster for nation rebuilding. I'm sure you don't mean that, but that's how they are playing it now. Sama aja, they are also corrupt. Kuan Yin pun corrupt, dia kata. But of course, you know how they have spin all this. Thank you. Yeah, I think I would. Thank you.
I just want to joke with Prof. Touch that in the era of fake news, it's difficult to have informed discussion. To answer Adrina's question, I think the GLCs and GLICs have played a very important role, and in many ways a good role in our society. But moving forward, we need to discuss what role should they play. For instance, you need a government to build internet line, and if private sector is to build internet line, phone line, water line, and electricity line, then it will duplicate, and therefore it is in many ways a natural monopoly. But whether the government should be involved in private hospital, that is something that we should debate. Whether the government should act as a car dealer, or whether the government should be a private developer, I think those are questions that we have to ask in the years to come. I don't vouch for anyone, because I think we don't know who will be tested by God eventually, and who will fall into the honey trap. What we should do, apart from educating the citizens, apart from having good education, is really strong institutions. We need to limit the power of Prime Minister. We need to have strong parliament. We need to have strong opposition and a strong cabinet. Now, our idea in Malaysia is basically, you don't want a strong parliament because you don't want the parliament to hindrance the work of the Prime Minister or the cabinet. And then you don't want a strong finance minister because the finance minister will compete with the Prime Minister in UMNO. So you cut it, and then you have a Prime Minister acting as also finance minister. And you don't want a strong opposition because they are a hindrance to development. I think those ideas has to be changed. When all institutions are strong, it is better for the nation. I think that is where we should move towards, and we should not hope for anyone to be our savior. All politicians are all human beings. They are bound to have there will be bound to be people who may not necessarily live up to the expectation, and that is part of human society. And I think we should be humble about that, and we should recognize that institutions is the most important element in the society, and not to hope for savior. On Izzat's questions, I think there are two parts. Which one is important? I don't want to say which one is more important. You see, for many Malays, the 1970 generation, the 70s generations, the new economic policy generations was the golden generation, because many actually came from rural areas, got the best education, and eventually live a middle class life. For most Malaysians, Malays and non-Malays all together, the 90s were the best era, where everyone felt that this nation was a great nation, and this nation was a nation before the crisis. But for the last 20 years, people somehow don't feel that, whether you're Malay, non-Malays, the young people don't feel any hope that this nation will be better in the years to come, or at least the economy will not be better in the years to come. So that, I think, is a major factor of brain drain. But also, whether wages is important or not, when I stand at the causeway of Johor, I am a KL boy. I contested in Penang. I'm now representing the Johor seat. When I stand at the causeway looking at the motorcycle, and every day 200,000 people at least who stay in Johor, Malaysians from every part of the country, including those from Sabah Sarawak, many of them from Sabah Sarawak. In fact, the Pasir Gudang division of UMNO actually has a few Christian branches because they are all from Sabah and they are Christian what they call Cawangan chief in Pasir Gudang. When I stand at the causeway looking at the motorcycle lane, I think wages also play a very important role because you see hundreds of thousands of Malaysians going to Singapore. Many of them are in the 3D sector. That means they go to Singapore working as foreign labor and doing the work of doing the work that Bangladeshi does in Malaysia. So Malaysians are in Singapore as construction worker, as bus driver, nurses, as what? Sorry? Cleaners. Yeah, cleaners. So they are doing 3D jobs in Singapore. And I go to the causeway very often because I represent a Johor seat and I see people, I meet people, and they're from all parts of Malaysia. They are not just Johorian. Wages matters. Okay, I think the hope and overall idea of the nation, whether they see hope, whether they feel that their work are recognized, is very important. But wages also matters to millions of people when it comes to their decision whether they go overseas or not. And to me, I think these are linked. We cannot segregate that there is a middle class problem, there is a what they call lower class problem. For instance, if in Malaysia we have less foreign workers, we will be forced to adopt a different set of policies. For instance, we will be forced to encourage women to go into the workforce, and the government will have to try to create an environment for women to go into the workforce conveniently. Childcare, aged care, and all other what they call the facilities to ensure women goes into the workforce conveniently. And I like to use this analogy, the garbage truck analogy. I think some of you might have heard it before. See, in Malaysia, when you see a garbage truck, whether in Selangor or elsewhere, with the exception of Penang, because I intervened a bit, very often you will see one Malaysian driving the truck. You'll see 5 Bangladeshi at the back of the truck. Okay? But if you go to Australia, and for those who have stayed in Australia, who have stayed in Japan, when you see a garbage truck, you see one person driving and no one else in the truck. So my question is, can we pay a truck driver, let's say, can we pay a garbage collector 2,000 ringgit a month? You will say, Liu Chin Tong, crazy, mad are you? But imagine that that garbage truck has only one person. That person is a driver, is a professional lorry driver, and he is also the operator of that automated machine. It's okay to pay him 2,000 ringgit a month. But when we pay him 2,000 ringgit a month, then we will not pay fresh grad lawyer 2,000 ringgit a month. Otherwise, all fresh grad lawyer wants to become a garbage collector. We will have to pay fresh grad lawyer a lot more. And that's where I think we have to deal with the wage problem, because today we are not just losing the brightest, but we are also losing ordinary Malaysians who are actually working elsewhere as 3D workers, which we can actually change. Of course, now people talk about fourth industrial revolution, automation. But I think automation is, for Malaysia, for the next 5 to 10 years, is still a positive factor. Automation has taken away jobs from the first world countries. But I think in Malaysia, we need to automate and we need to pay Malaysian ordinary workers better in order to keep them in our economy. Now, once Malaysian workers are paid better, they will spend in the economy, and we will have a different sort of economy. Let's say Malaysian workers who are reasonably well-skilled, if they are working in our economy and not working elsewhere, and spend in the economy, they will actually be spending more in the economy, and we'll have a different sort of economy. But also, in order to do that, we must help the factories to upgrade. We must help the industry to upgrade in order to use less labor, but depend on more automation and depend on more skilled workers. And I think that is a major challenge that is not going to happen overnight, but there must be some political will and clarity. And I hope we can push that in the years to come.
My question goes to Dr. Zulkifli and Dr. Noraini. Dr. Zul, you say that you are a Muslim Democrat, but at the same time, the PKR leaders claim that they are also Muslim Democrats. So my question is, why you not join them instead of establishing new party? Okay. So the second question: how Amanah tolerate with sensitive issues such as Islamic law, hudud, LGBT, and even Selena Gomez concert? How you're going to tolerate all these kind of things? Okay. Okay. Actually, I have one more question for Dr. Noraini. Dr. Noraini, I'm from IKMAS UKM, same place with you. So, question is about the political ideology also can lead to the extremism and radicalism. Actually, that's my PhD thesis. So I want to ask your opinion. So how the system in Islam can be categorized as represents its Muslim community to against political extreme?
Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I have a question for Dr. Zulkifli also. I think we have a problem with the ideas of Islamic State. So I guess Dr. Zulkifli also not interested with the Islamic State, right? So in regard for Islam to be a progressive, shumul, universal, can you tell me what is the system, what is the Islam system of public administration? That is because you will govern this country. So, or Islam only just talk about value, ethics, like just YB Liu Chintong said before, we need a value of religion in a political economy. And like YB Liu Chintong said, also, it's a talk about wage, it's talk about mechanism of economic system. And my question is about a political system that is a progressive Islam. I mean, what is the progressive Islamic political system? Of course, you will put aside monarchy system. So that is my question.
It's for YB Liu Chintong. So I think looking forward, it's very important for us to be, rather than macro, looking at macro level of scrutinizing our politicians in federal level, perhaps we should also, the citizens and the Harapan should look in more detail on the practice of good governance in state level, and as well as economic program. For instance, Selangor, the approaches are more social welfare, which is populist, but it also kind of like catalyzing the local economy as well through free public transportation and all that. So rather than just being very ambiguous about on, you know, just focusing on what federal level can do, but we go to other thing. I'm very interested when Adriana was talking about you know, responsibility, how to be responsible, and I think this is where asset declaration becomes very, very vital. And you know, Dr. Michael Jayakumar just published his asset declaration, and why don't Harapan, you know, be you, whether you are you know, you should, you know, publicly declare, even though there's no law that obliges you to do so. Thank you.
Right. Moise, I would begin by saying this, yeah. I think, so counterproductive to begin with, and dragging us into a polemic of who is more Islamic, more Democrat. And we have left this discourse, we have left this debate. It is okay for anyone else to, call themselves, no qualms. Where we are coming from, the narrative of where we are coming from was because we, left our party, believing that for all the work that we tried to transform. Remember, in 2002, the PAS launched document Negara Islam. In 2004, they were almost like on their knees, given a bleeding nose, after winning big 27 seats in 1999 Reformasi election, right? All because, among other things, the most dominant factor for failing that, because I was writing the post-mortem, was because of the document Negara Islam and the failure to membuat penerangan, the failure to expound on what it really means. So we have PAS has become unelectable then. They reduced from 27 to just 6 seats. So why I have to say that was I've got to allude that because amanah, not because we were ousted, not because we have lost the party's election. It's not that. We believe that that was the critical juncture for a second generation, that will advocate this progressive, inclusive Islam. Because remember, the think tank of PAS, we came after 2004, 2008, we launched that the benevolent state, negara berkebajikan, if all of you remember. I'm not quite sure whether PAS still holds on to that. So this was all the progressive and being passed into a centrist position in the political, ideological milieu of Islam or Islamism or whatever. But because we failed to transform that, hence the need to amanah to come out. And keadilan rakyat has never taken that discourse. So we were, in a way, more there. Bukanlah kerana kita, it's not because we are not able to, it's not that. Because we thought that Islamic position, that contestation on Islamic discourse must not be monopolized by PAS. And keadilan then had never gone into a contestation on that. So all the more now, you see a contrast of PAS and amanah. By way of how we have crafted our messaging, Islam as the blessing, rahmah lil alamin kind of message that we put forward for amanah. So again, I'm most disturbed by forcing us to be I'm not. You certainly have the right to observe that. Why not you join keadilan? But as far as we are concerned, we need an Islamic discourse that will not allow a sole voice bypass to monopolize the Islamic narrative and the Islamic discourse. So that's it. I would quickly go into Nazarin's question. Yeah. This is exactly how I will illustrate to sort of contrast with PAS. Yeah? Rather than striving to finally establish an Islamic state, or perhaps even the Khilafah Islamiyah, whatever, those are the narrative of the first generation, mind you. If I may just coin what Professor Lu'ay Sofi, one of the contemporary Muslim scholars, into this, he uses this term. The objective of the Islamic second generation political party is to linasa iqamatu dawlatu madaniyah tahma masalihul mawatin wa laysa iqamatu dawla diniyah tar'a masalihul muslimin. Please allow me just 2 minutes, Ihsan, to elaborate on this. We strive to establish finally a civil state. That is second generation narrative. Establishment of a civil state that serves the purpose of fulfilling the entire citizenry, as opposed to Iqamatu Dawla Diniyah, the establishing of a religious state or Islamic state that has its premise in serving the interests of Lil Muslimin. Of course, if I'm allowed to to just elaborate on that. Hence, when we coin and when we frame our narrative of apa yang menjadi, what will be the objective of amanah, adalah untuk melahirkan, is to finally establish sebuah negara madani as seen in the time of the Prophet, and is best illustrated by the Sahifa, the Medinan constitution, that embraces plurality and calling the entire citizen as antum ummatun wahida. You are one community despite all the religious, plurality, whatever. So this is why we, on the first instant, call on our membership to be embracing all faiths, all religious, all races and ethnic background, whatever. So because we believe that this is the true embodiment of Islam. So what then is the civil state? That civil state, in its implementation, in its embodiment, in its religion, in its legal, political construct, whatever, how we, Amanah, would want to see would be back to the maqasid, the objective of achieving total well-being, the objective of achieving justice, the objective of achieving a truly egalitarian society, if I may use that word, would have to strive and contest on the legislative process. Yeah? Amanah must come out to explain themselves in a compelling, convincing, yet engaging democratically. If ever we want to, this is how we see RUU 355 for that matter. PAS would immediately say that those who oppose, you know what, yeah? Islam, ada yang kata kafir, they ostracize you, they make you, infidels, munafik dan sebagainya. Because they don't quite understand that in a civil state, legislative process must be engaging the entire stakeholders, Muslim and otherwise, adherents of other faiths, followers of other political conviction and whatnot. The entire stakeholders must be engaged in that political process called al-taqneen. And that is very cardinal to the process of legislation in Islam. No one should, monopolize and as if represent God, even though you may attempt to, legislate verses or prescription, legal prescription from the Book of Allah, from the Quran. But as soon as it takes a legislative process, that must be subjected to contest, critique, and differences. So that is what that's why civil state, negara madani, is so cardinal to us. And in the sense of what else? So this would be how we will have to, advocate this. And our constitution, the Malaysian constitution, provides for rooms for contestation to exist, to happen. And, it's quite unfortunate that I dare say that there is a PhD holder in Sharia coming from our vice president who really believed that, I'm just quoting him, that actually we shouldn't have even a dual legal implementation of the legal system, because if we Muslims are able to, bring into contestation what would be superior and efficacy as a legal system, we shouldn't have to have this dual implementation that and see all these consequences of having a dual implementation of civil and Sharia law. We should be courageous enough, audacious enough, yeah, judicious enough, and compelling enough to contest it in the legislative process. And if truly the Sharia is superior, be it, we will have it within the civil, within one legal system. And of course, this is a big debate. I think I've opened up a Pandora box here. And I'm sure we'll get front page perhaps. Please, media, you're going to be merciful to me. But what I'm saying is, these are the kind of rethinking Islam. And these are what is necessary to contest and question all those doctrines that have been taken for granted for all these years. And we believe that we want to be an active and progressive political actors in nation rebuilding. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, to Muiz's question, currently CIS is leading numerous women's group, Muslim women's group from every Muslim country in the project called Musawa. You can check the website, musawa.org. CIS and all this fellow women's group have decided that they should begin with the private sphere, challenge the notions, concept, and practices of gender roles and gender inequalities within the institution of marriage and family. And in that context, what the Musawa group have decided was to look at each Muslim country's Islamic family law. And what they found in common was the concept and notion of tiwama that's found in the Quranic verse 434. It refers to men as one degree higher to women because they are the guardian of within society, within family. We must contextualize this historically in pre-modern Arabic society, clan-based Arabic society, where men, the eldest male, played a very important role and lead the family as well as the community. So if you look at there's already publication of 2 books. What the Musawa project has been doing this past 5 years was to invite every Muslim scholars, progressive as well as traditionalists and somewhat conservative, to have a debate, to have a discussion of how the interpretation, what are the mechanics, what are the interpretive framework, what is the methodology that has been used by all these scholars. So for those who are interested, it will be interesting for you to either get the books, but you can borrow, I think, the books from CIS library, or buy the books. They are not that expensive. It's in paperback. Or check the various ongoing articles that has been put on the Musawa website that describe this project of trying to critically unpack received ideas and notions, and those that have been propagated for the last 1,200 years about the role of men and women in marriage and family.
Thank you. I would just like to respond to Adila's questions. I think it's important. I agree with you that state-level politics is also important, and we have been a very centralized federation. We are more of a centralized system rather than a federal system. And moving forward, there's a need to look at how to decentralize power to the states, in particular to Sabah Sarawak. I think the disenchantment among Sabah Sarawakians towards the federal government is very serious, and for the nation to hold together in the long run, there is a need to have a new deal for Sabah Sarawak so that the state actually run more programs or take more responsibilities in governing. For instance, education, for instance, even local policing can be handed to state government and run in the context of democracy. And of course, with more taxation going back to the state, I think that is also a way to to go. So I agree with you. State government should play a more important role, and we should decentralize as much as we can in the years to come. On public declaration of asset, I think it's good. I work within the political party system. I think in the long run, if there's a new government, we should request all to declare assets together. At the moment, Selangor and Penang government, elected reps who hold government position have to declare assets. I think in the long run, if preferably all elected reps should be full-time elected reps. At the moment, many elected reps are part-time because they are also lawyers, they are also doctors. But in the long run, for a better nation to function, all should be full-time elected rep, pay reasonably, and they all have to declare assets. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, YB Chintong. Thank you, Dr. Zulkifli. Thank you, Prof. Noraini. Indeed, it's quite a long and quite interesting discussion as well. To summarize in just one line, I just point out the main key points on the challenges which need to be faced towards a more progressive Malaysian Muslim society. First, a strong commitment politics based on democratic principles, and the importance to emphasize on justice when it comes to economy, particularly addressing works and policies, and also an important part on education policies, particularly on academic freedom, which we need to highlight. But still, as the concern which shared by Dr. Zulkifli Ahmad, most likely election is around the corner, and without the participation, without people participating and voting in the election, depends whatever party they want to vote. I don't suggest you to just simply accept, not just simply accept all the proposition given by our fellow speakers, but take into consideration. But what is also important is not just for the politicians to put away that they can perform, but also how we ourselves, as the general public, who can believe back in the system on democracy, participate in the system, and commit ourselves towards a more progressive Malaysian Muslim society. Okay, I'll end there. And as I've informed before, our lunch session is already being prepared, and our checkout time is basically at 12. But if for those who are going to go back to the room, you need to validate your key card again so that you can go back to your room. And I think that's all. And I think on behalf of IRF, I would like to thank everyone, all participants from Malaysia, from Singapore, for spending the time over the weekend. And I hope to see you all soon. Thank you.